Are we live? Testing, testing. Are we live? Not sure. Yes, now it says we're live. But it's not live on the screen. There's quite a delay. There it goes. Okay, there's like a 30-second delay, 20 seconds maybe. Anyway, but on all accounts, we are live now on this Monday evening, August 22nd, 2023. It's 9:43 p.m. Central, where I'm at in Minnesota. And many people live in the Central Time Zone, but I was just thinking, so if it's in California, it's only 7:43, 44. But if you're in New York or East Coast, you're right. The hour, huh? Yeah, it would be pretty late there. It's 10:45. So anyway, wherever you are, if you're listening on the replay or listening live tonight, I just want to say in the wintertime, it gets dark really early. I usually move my live streams earlier. I've been doing these live streams since 2017. And as it starts to get earlier in the fall, or the sunsets get earlier, I like to at some point move it up to like 8:30 instead of 9:30. 8:30, maybe even 8 o'clock in the dead winter, because it is actually dark like 4:30 in December. So anyway, just so people know, the summers are, I do come on later in the summer than in the winter, because it just gets dark out so late, and I am outside till it gets dark out. So that's just how it is. So anyway, so yeah, in the winter time, it'd be more like 8:30 Central Time, which would be, I'd say, an hour and a half earlier than I come on now in the summer. Anyway, because I'm outside till it gets dark. Right before it gets dark, I go shut everything down outside and head in. But I am usually out all day outside. So usually coincide sometimes with like, yeah. Wait a minute, I'm trying to pull something up. Actually, you know what? I'll just pull up my thumbnail. On the thumbnail, you can see, well, actually, by the title, you can see. Let me see where the title is. Get over here to YouTube. Tonight's title is The Two Creation Stories in Genesis 1 and 2. These are doublets. They're called doublets. And what they are, they're contributed. The story is really a contribution of two or three. A triplet would be two or three sources that contribute to the story, and sometimes they redact them. They just kind of melt them together, try to seam them together, and very good actually, because sometimes nobody notices, but it has been studied and by scholars and whatnot. So it's been broken down into multiple sources, which we went over yesterday, I think, during the introduction of doublets. Kind of explains how it works. You have the Yahweh source. This is the J source. You have the E source, the Elohim source. Actually, I'll pull up this. This isn't what I have in the thumbnail, but I will show. There you go. So I'm going to get that light so don't shine on there. That's a little better. All right. So anyway, I hope everyone had a wonderful day. What was it, Monday? Yep. I worked around here, and at the end of the day, me and the doggies went into town. That's milk, bread, and eggs, huh, boys? Anyway, and some hard candy. Anyway, but what a great day, a beautiful day. I know it was warm. It's in the 80s, but I noticed down in St. Paul, it was in the 90s. It was actually, I think it was 100. Really hot down there. So anyway, glad I missed that. And that's about it here. Let me pull this a little closer because it's tipping. Oops. Don't want it to tip. There we go. All right. So, first doublet we're going to go over in this series. Not sure how long the series will last. A mosquito in here. You know what else I saw, which is funny. I was just reading an article about fruit flies, and sure enough, I got fruit flies from all those vegetables I brought in from the garden. So they showed how to make a little trap. You gotta cut a plastic bottle, but I don't drink anything but water out of a cup, so I don't have a plastic bottle. But you cut it and turn it upside down, put apple cider vinegar in it. Actually, I'd have to buy a bottle. But anyway, there is a way to trap those things. Because I got a lot of vegetables coming in out of my garden, which is great. I can't can it fast enough, but yeah, I got a whole counter full. I got my center island in the kitchen filled full with vegetables, and yeah, I've canned a lot already. So anyway, yeah, so I got fruit flies, and one thing I'm thankful for, the wood ticks have not been bad this year. This is like the first year they've not been bad. Because I live in the highest Lyme's disease county, I think, in the United States. One of the highest, Pine County. Because we got the most amount of deer. We got a lot of deer here. They're just packed. Well, hey, Dee. Hi, Kathy. I decided to not rent where I had talked about. I picked her up from a meeting this morning. When I brought her back to her place, I veered to the left of the dirt road to avoid a dip. Oh, did she lose it? Hold on a second. I gotta get back to the chat because I'm trying to be on the phone. To avoid the dip was in front of her soon-to-be mother-in-law house. Really? I veered to the left of the dirt road to avoid a dip. The dip was in front of her soon-to-be mother-in-law house. Oh, does she have a fiance? I'm assuming. Soon-to-be mother-in-law. Oh, is she getting married? She said there's no way she could evict. She said there's no way she could evict her, but I don't want to be in a family feud. You mean, because she's getting a divorce, right? It would be her soon-to-be ex-mother-in-law? Huh. Oh, so there's a... Yeah, that's why I kind of figured ex-mother-in-law. Oh, yes. You would not want to be in the middle of that, huh? Yeah. Well, sorry that won't work out, but I agree. I would not get in the middle of that. You know, you know, I, I forgot that screen it was on. Um, she said she was getting divorced and it was amicable, but you know, people get nasty during a divorce. The claws come out because there's money involved and sometimes a lot of money with the house and whatever. So people aren't really at their best. And if she's saying that she can't get evicted, that means they might be even trying to evict her. That means the issue has come up, you know what I mean? Anyway, well, sorry to hear that. But good thing to find out now. Huh. Uh, well, it's better to find out nowadays than after you've already moved out of your apartment, you know what I mean? The sooner you find out, the better. It is a big leap to move in with somebody, leave somewhere. Plus, I don't want my car getting stuck in mud. They need to put gravel down. I realize it's expensive, but it's expensive to have my car pulled out of the mud. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, up here it's like $350 for like a dump truck to come with rocks. And what they do is they don't spread it, not up here anyway. That company, they just kind of dump it while they're pulling forward, and you got to do all the spreading. I did it when I moved up here because it was all mucky, and yeah, well, that's just part of living in the country. There's the dirt roads and the. We've got a road grader. He comes, I don't know, every 2 weeks. And in the winter, do you know how we get plowed out of here? The same road grader guy. They use a road grader to get us out of here, get the snow for a snowplow. That's what they use, road grader. Which is kind of funny. Really old guy, but now all of a sudden, I don't know if something happened to the old guy. All of a sudden, there's some young buck driving it. Some young man, I don't know. He didn't really know how to run it very good because he gouged up my yard. Probably would cost about the same. My rent would probably cover it. Yeah. And you know what you can do? Sometimes gravel drivers have like, or dirt drivers have like certain dips in it. You get a load of class 5, just dirt, and you have them dump it over the dip spots. You just kind of drive over a bunch, and then you get the rock. If you got any low like dips and stuff like that, where people are getting stuck in water gathers, that's about the same, $300 or something. I don't know. It was a couple years, but I don't know what it costs now. But I'd figure out what that costs because that can be fixed. But anyway, but still, you got that family feud going on there. But she wants to babysit kids at her place, like kids, but don't want to be around the all day. Yeah. Oh boy, a daycare. Remember what I said earlier? I just said that. Actually, yeah, keep looking. Yeah, I just said the same thing. I just said that exact same thing. I just wouldn't want to have little kids running, screaming, and making a mess in my house. Um, if they go home at the end of the day, that's fine. But no, I wouldn't want a daycare at my house, though. It's tolerable if they're your kids or your grandkids, but if they're somebody else's, it's not. 24/7. Just like I said, it would be really hard to rent with, somebody with little kids. Because I had little kids, back in the 80s. And it was fun as heck when you're the parent. It was fun. But if you're not the parent, not so fun. All right. I'm going to move over. Well, yep, keep looking. And good thing to find out now, D, rather than after you've moved out of your place and lost it. So where am I going to start? So I'm going to start tonight by just saying that we're going to go over Genesis 1 and 2 creation stories. Wouldn't have been many kids, but even with 2, they're usually at each other's throat. Yeah, they're loud, screaming, and they're messy, and yeah. Like I said, if it's just your kids, it's great. But if you're renting somewhere in chaos, it's kind of chaos. When they're not your kids, it seems like chaos. Anyway, like I said, totally different when they're your kids, but when they're somebody else's kids, and you're retired, not so much. Anyway, but there'd be some people out there who would probably like it. I mean, so maybe not everybody wouldn't like it, but somebody out there might like moving in a house with tons of kids. You know, different strokes for different folks. All right, so Genesis 1 and 2. All right, so we're going to go first of all. In case anybody doesn't know, there are 2 creation stories in Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2. And we're going to go over that, the differences in the 2, where they come from with the 2. So anyway, it's kind of cool. We got a lot to go through. And hey, Grace, good evening to Grace. Hope you stayed cool today. I heard it was hot down where you guys are at. I'm like 100 miles north of the Twin Cities, and it was much cooler here than it was. Almost 100. It was 100 down there. All right. So yeah, read Dee's comment. She's wrote her stuff down there. All right. So what I'm gonna do? Oops. So Genesis 1 and 2. I'm gonna read. I think we'll start out reading Genesis 1 and 2. Genesis 1 takes about 5. No, I'm sorry. It takes about 3 minutes to read Genesis 1, 3 minutes to read Genesis 2. And we're going to go over lots of differences that are between Genesis 1 and 2. And then where did they get that? Where did this creation story come from? Where did they get this story? Not like Adam and Eve were sitting there with the pen and pencil, or with paper, or carving it into rocks. Anyway, so yeah, we'll figure out where that came from too, and that will lead us till tomorrow night, where we're gonna go over that. So we're gonna explain all that. Greetings to you too, Grace, my fellow Minnesotan. All right. So, here it is. So I'm going to blow this up a little bit so you can see it. Bigger. Now everybody has read Genesis 1 and 2 probably lots of times. Now this ad here is creeping up on me. All right. The creation of the world. Oops. Actually, I'll just read it because these ads are covering it. This is Bible Gateway. It always used to knock me off StreamYard when I was running off my laptop. Ugh. You know why? Because all the ads. It would be motioning, ads would be playing out of nowhere and just ruin my connection. But anyway, so Genesis 1, let's read that. The creation of the world. Genesis 1, this is the English version, by the way. Standard English. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw that the light was good. And God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening and there was morning the first day. And God said, "Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so. And God called the expanse heaven. And there was an evening and there was a morning the second day. And God said, "Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, "Let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit in which is their seed, and each according to its kind on the earth." And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed according to their own kinds, and the trees bearing fruit in which is their seed, each according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning the third day. God said, "Let the lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. And let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. And God set them over the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning the fourth day. God said, "Let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, and let the birds fly above the earth and expanse of the heavens." So God created the sea creatures and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. God saw that it was good, and God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth." And there was evening and there was morning the fifth day. God said, "Let the earth bring forth creatures according to their kinds, livestock and creeping things, and beasts of the earth according to their kinds." And it was so. God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and the livestock according to their kinds, and everything creeps on the ground according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish, and over the seas, and the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. God blessed them. God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." God said, "Behold, I've given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has breath of life, I've given every green plant for food." And it was so. And God saw that everything that he made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning the sixth day. Now on the seventh day God rests. And this is chapter 2. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the hosts of them. And on the seventh day God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because in it God rested from all his work that he had done. And hopefully, I'll try to put this up without the ad seems to have stopped for a second. So in 2:4, here you have the creation of man and woman again. We already went over that, remember? But anyway, these are the generations of the heavens and the earth when they were created in the day that the Lord made the earth and the heavens. When no bush of the field was yet in the land, and no small plant of the field had yet sprung up, for the Lord God had not caused it to rain on the land, and there was no man to work the ground. A mist was going up from the land and was watering the whole face of the ground. Now they said no man was there, but a minute ago there was a boy and girl. Then the Lord formed the man of dust from the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. The man became a living creature. Now, isn't it funny if you asked all the people you can the creation story, how Adam and Eve were made? This is the story that most people know. How God made Adam from the dust and breathed life into him, and then he put him to sleep and made, spoiler alert, put him to sleep and makes Eve because needs help or whatever, lonely. But anyway, so this is the second really creation story that's meshed in here. So then the Lord God, formed the man out of the dust, out of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. And the man became a living creature, and the Lord God planted a garden in Eden in the east, and there he put the man whom he had formed. And out of the ground the Lord made to spring up every tree that is pleasant to the sight of God, that is food. The tree of life was in the midst of the garden, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. A river flowed out of the garden, and there it divided and became 4 rivers, and then it just goes on from there. And then, of course, and Eve is there. Now, so those are the really two stories of creation of man. Now, let's compare these two. I've got a lot of sources that we're going to compare. Who wrote the two different stories that were really meshed together almost seamlessly? But let's go over it. So I got quite a few of these sources. So let me. I had a book. Let me grab a book. Oh, it's right here. All right, so here we go. Hopefully you can see that. I blew it up a little bit. So here's Genesis 1 and 2. Let's move back a little bit, perhaps. I'll fit in the picture here. So Genesis 1 and 2, we're going to be comparing these. So in Genesis 1, the first creation story, and the second creation, there's the obvious differences. God created man first, and then later he created the woman. That we saw that in the second version. In Genesis 1, man and woman are created at the same time. Now, I want to show you the sources that this came from, because there's a lot more differences in this, but I'm going to show you the two sources that this came from. It is the J source and the Preci source. So the Yahweh source and the Preci source. Now, let me pull this up. So we went over this yesterday, this picture here. this illustration here of the sources that go into the Old Testament. So you have early oral and written sources came first in 922 BC. They recorded it. The J, the Yahweh source, and the E, the Elohim source. So these two were the first. All right. Then 200 years later, you had the Deuteronomy source and the priestly source, and they added these two together, the J and the E source, and to produce this here, they all came together in 539. So all these came together, but what was first? It was the J and E, and then the Deuteronomy and the priestly, okay? So, let me find the... Let me find the, yeah. So, here's the sources in Genesis. You have, this is where we're talking about at the beginning here. So what do you have? You have the J source, the Yahweh source, and the priestly source. And as we saw, the Yahweh source came hundreds of years before the priestly source. But those are the two sources that are in this story. That's the two places it's coming from. We went over that yesterday, the northern and the southern kingdoms. And so, as far as so one more look at the sources. You've got the Yahweh source 950, and that is that's Genesis 2. Genesis 2 goes back to 950. Genesis 1 comes from the priestly source. That's 500 BCE. So BCE 950 was that 6, 7, 8, 9, 450 years later, the priestly source adds theirs in there. Okay, so these are the two that you're dealing with. So, as I'm going to show you real quick in the doublets, Bible brisket. Let me find Bible brisket. I have so many tabs open right now. All right, Bible brisket. Because we're going to show you where the two sources come. Here it is. Doublets Bible brisket. Now, the creation story. This is doublets in the Hebrew Bible. You have the Yahweh source, Elohim source, Deuteronomy, and the priestly source. We just saw what order they came in. Genesis 1 and 2. And Genesis, this is the creation story that we're going over tonight. Genesis 1 and 2. So Genesis 1 is going to come from the priestly source, which was written 500 BCE. And Genesis 2 was written 900 BCE, way earlier, 940 or whatever it was. And that's the Yahweh source, the J source, okay? So they've identified it that two sources wrote Genesis 1 and 2. Now, let's do some comparisons between the two. Now, you've seen how it's identified as two sources. Okay, creation story number 1. We'll go over some of the obvious ones here. People have never compared the differences between the two. They're right here. We're going to go over quite a few of them. Creation story number 1. So in Genesis 1, God created humans after he created everything else. Remember day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, and all that. In Genesis 1, God created man and woman at the same time, which seems more logical than having an afterthought about, he should have a woman. Like, how are they going to go forth and multiply if you just put one man on the earth by himself? Anyway, seems more logical. But anyway, and So God created man and woman at the same time in Genesis 1. In Genesis 2, God created man first, and then after that, he created animals, and then he created woman. That's in Genesis 2. So in creation story number 1, in Genesis 1, God just spoke, and from his words, everything came into existence. But in creation story number 2, which obviously is different gods that they were worshiping, creation story number 2, God had to, in quotations, work in order to form humans from the dust, breathe life into them, get a rib from man to create a woman, etc. So see, he's kind of got hands on. He's got to do this by hand. Over here, he just speaks things into existence. Over here, he's building it like a tool shop. All right, creation story number 1. In Genesis 1, after the creation, God looked at all he has done and was greatly pleased and happy. But in Genesis 2, God banished the first couple, Adam and Eve, from the Garden of Eden in his anger at their disobedience. Which is kind of funny because then they hadn't gotten any rules yet. But anyway, so it's just a different God over here than there is here. So there's kind of some obvious differences. Let's keep going. Wait, so we're gonna break it down. Oh, here's my thumbnail. And it's like, if you've ever read, I've read it a lot of times before. One day I came on a live stream a few years ago. I'm like, I don't know, a couple of years ago. I'm like, wow, you guys, I just realized there's 2 creation stories because I just read Genesis 1 and 2. I thought, wow, this is like 2 stories. My first, here's just a quick little blog. Humans created. So the similarities between, let's look at the similarities between, we just saw differences, right? Now let's look at some similarities between the 2. Genesis 1 and 2. Blow this up a little bit. Maybe it'll be bigger. All right, there you go. Oops. All right, so similarities and differences between 1 and 2. So similarities, humans were created in the image of God, like a deity. God thought creation was good. That's both of them at first. And then God was the creator of everything, and stewardship is shown. Now, the difference is God, in Genesis 1, focuses on the creation of the world, like day 1, day 2, day 3, when everything was created. In Genesis 2, it focuses on the creation of the humans. Like, mostly it shows how, you had to put Adam to sleep and get a rib and all that and make him out of dust and blow, Anyway. The physical hands-on functioning, but over here he's speaking as we already discussed. Genesis 1 is more factual and formal, is a more factual and formal account, just the facts, man. And in Genesis 2 is a more personal account. God speaks to Adam and Eve. In Genesis 1, the animals were created first, and in Genesis 2, man was created first. So in Genesis 1, the animals and everything was created before man. And in Genesis 2, man was created first and then the animals. So there's some similarities and differences in 1 and 2. I keep going. I'm not going to read all that first part. Probably not the tab I wanted. We'll keep going. It's so slow to load up here. Anyway, I hope everyone's doing well. What is the relationship between creation accounts in Genesis 1 and 2? And by the way, tomorrow we're going to go over something which is kind of interesting about Genesis 1 and 2. Anyway, so the relationship between the creation accounts of 1 and 2. I'm going to just go right down here. There are big differences between. So anyway, so as you may have noticed, if you use the King James or whatever, you'll notice, it depends what version, but you'll notice that the name changes right off the bat. So there's different names for God in Genesis. First, we should note that creation accounts in Genesis 1 and 2 consistently use different names for God, whereas the first account uses the generic name term Elohim, which is Hebrew for God. And why is that? Because the first one is the priestly source. Remember, the first account uses that. So Genesis 1 uses the name Elohim, which is Hebrew for God. Right up to Genesis 2:3, when the second account comes into, and then at the second account in Genesis 2 verse 3, when they start over and start making man again, the second creation account in Genesis 2 uses the compound name Yahweh Elohim, starting in Genesis 2:4. This continues until Genesis 3:24, which is the formal end of the garden narrative about human creation and the origin of sin, which I think is interesting. Right? I mean, just all this is just kind of all confirms that there's different sources, because Genesis 1's a totally different story calling the God Elohim, and Genesis 2 is a totally different story, and calling, the Yahweh source is calling, which is obviously Genesis 2 is the Yahweh source, the J source, right? And they're calling him Elohim. All right, so there's a difference in style between Genesis 1 and 2. There's difference in style, scope, and organization. Two creation accounts also have different style, scope, organizational principles. Genesis 1 describes the creation of the entire cosmos, heaven and earth, over 6 days with repetition and patterning. Climaxing with God's rest on the seventh day. By contrast, Genesis 2, the first chapter of the garden story, is more straightforwardly a narrative in the formal sense, with a series of tensions and resolutions. In a contrast to the wide-angle Genesis 1, which surveys the cosmos as a whole, Genesis 2 zooms in telescopically on humanity and earth. The third thing is the different evaluations of the stages of creation. The two accounts also have different evaluations of the various stages of creation. Thus, Genesis 1 is peppered with statements at multiple stages of the creation process that God saw that it was good. Every time he did something, God saw that it was good. In Genesis 1, 4, 10, 12, 18, 21, 25, and ultimately that it was very good at the end. Genesis 1:31. By way of contrast, at one point in Genesis 2, we find Yahweh God saying, "It is not good." All of a sudden, he decides, the Yahweh God said, "It is not good that man should be alone." Because remember, before it was all good, and then now it's not good. So in Genesis 2, it's like there's an afterthought. Like, oh, it's not good. I thought it was good, but I guess it's not good, because he shouldn't be alone. Man should not be alone. This specifies a plot tension in the narrative that is resolved by the creation of the woman. We are clearly in a different literary world than from Genesis 1. The real kicker of all this that we're going to go over tomorrow night. I'm not even going to tell you yet. I'll tell you when we get done with this page. Different evaluations of the stages of creation. Now, next is the different order of creation events, which we went over. Perhaps most significantly, for those attempting to harmonize Genesis with science, there's a different order of creation events of each chapter. In each chapter, to begin with, two creation accounts open with different, indeed opposite, descriptions of the initial state of the world, where Genesis 1 starts with the earth inundated with water, just water. In Genesis 1 2. So that God has to separate the waters for the dry land to emerge in Genesis 1 9. Genesis 2 begins with the earth as a dry wilderness in Genesis 2 5 until a stream or mist emerges from to provide water in Genesis 2 6. Then, attending to just those creative events mentioned in both chapters, the following divergences are evident. Genesis 1 has water first, then land, followed by plants, animals, and finally humans. Adam, consisting in male and female together. And because remember, Adam just means a human. And that human was, some people think that that's male and female, just like, anyway. But anyway, it was a male and female to begin with. Adam. By contrast, Genesis 2 begins with the existence of land, and then comes water, followed by a human, Adam, later specified as a man. Then plants and animals, and finally a woman. Woman came last. How many humans did God create? We should also take note of how many humans God created. Well, we often think of the first humans as a premortal couple. We need to balance the picture in Genesis 2 with that of Genesis 1, where God creates not individuals, but population groups to fill various niches, including flying creatures of the sky, swarming things in the water, and then land on both, and then on land for both animals and humans, later designated by a collective noun, Adam. Christians only read this account of human creation as an original couple because we retroject the account of Genesis 2 back into Genesis 1. That is the thing where they just mix it all together. That is the thing that most people do. They, the order it was in, and then, anyway, kind of a little bit of both. But we need to respect the different portrayals in creation account. So which creation account is scientifically or literally true? These divergences between the creation account Genesis 1 and 2 suggest that these texts are not teaching science, for then we would need to ask which account is scientifically true. They cannot both be true at a scientific level. But even beyond the question of science, we should not take these texts literal. Now, I'll talk about that in a minute. Possible approaches to reading Genesis 1 and 2 together. They've done that. Now, we just talked about this for the first time last night. She said the T is silent, so it'd be Alada or something. And so there's another way to rethink Genesis 1 and 2. These are the I don't know how to say that word, in each case. So really what they're doing, what it is, given it can introduce either narrative or genealogy or combination of both. So it kind of, anyway, Genesis 1 2 has the prologue of the book of Genesis. In a coherent theological vision. Now I want to show you something which is kind of funny, makes it all kind of funny. The thing is, both Genesis 1 and 2 were actually taken from Babylonian and Mesopotamian texts. Mesopotamian texts that came long before them. Which we might talk about tomorrow night. Let me show you real quick. So both sources behind Genesis creation narrative borrowed themes from the Mesopotamian mythology, but adapted them to their belief in one God, establishing a monotheistic creation in opposition to the polytheistic creation myth. So I'm going to show you. Is Genesis stolen from Babylonian myths? Maybe we'll go over this tomorrow. But there is creation stories, all kinds of stories that came through Babylonia and Mesopotamian texts. So, neither one of them might not be original there, because where are they getting it? Like I said at the beginning, where are they getting it? They didn't have nothing to write down, so where are they Adam and Eve, I'm talking about Adam and Eve, how are they writing everything down? So obviously, and so did Genesis borrow creation story from Mesopotamian myths? So there is some Mesopotamian and Babylonian. Seems to be a little bit of influence in there. The account of creation of Genesis 1 and 2 gives, as has long been recognized, the same order of events as is found in the Babylonian Genesis, or called Enuma Elish. In both sources, the successive stages listed as primeval chaos, light, sky, dry land, astral bodies, and each account culminates in the creation of man. So anyway, that's kind of interesting. Maybe we'll go over that tomorrow. I'll see how much that is, how much evidence there is for that, because it is related to Doublets, I guess. Genesis 1 and 2. Genesis 1 and a Babylonian creation story. So see, there's a lot of stuff out there saying that they got the story. And also the story of Job. I think that came from Mesopotamia, I'm not sure, but anyway, the old country, the earliest. And Jonah, the book of Jonah also. And like I said, even there was one article that said, that I was reading on here, it's that they saying maybe it would have to do with the fish god. Trying to prove that their god, but I'm not sure if that's Elohim or Yahweh, but their god was outdid Dagon, the fish god. Anyway, let's see if I have anything else to go through. We're getting almost at an hour here. Let's see if I missed any tabs. I had a lot open. Let me just make sure I didn't miss any. Yep. Well, I told you better to find out now than before you move in. Let me shut some of these. Okay. Here's another contrast between anyway, here's another source, comparison and contrast. Genesis 1, the man and woman are created on the same day. God creates the earth, heavens, vegetations, everything, and then he creates man. God creates man in his own image. And over here in Genesis 2, man is made from the dust before God breathed life into him. Then God creates woman from the rib of a man. So created in God's own image as compared to forming him. And on the seventh day, God rested in Genesis 1. And on Genesis 2, God created the tree of the forbidden knowledge on the seventh day. Man is given dominion over God's creations in Genesis 1. In Genesis 2, God gives man dominion over the Garden of Eden, but cannot eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. A little bit of difference there. Actually, kind of a lot of difference. Let me shut some of these down and make sure we got everything. So as you can see, different, and then again, actually, I just want to, come on, you, there it goes. Let me just shut these down as I go through them. Make sure I didn't. You know what? I think there might even be I think there might even be a Catholic version. All right, let me see. I think that's and just as an overview, real quick. Oops. This thing is touchy as can be. Well, actually, opposite touchy. It's not touchy at all. Doesn't work. All right, so as an overview, here's creation story number 1. God made the earth over a period of 7 days. Each day, God had a plan. And in 2, he doesn't. I think I just said he did something in 2 on the 7th day, but that's not true. Because there's no days are numbered in the second creation story. I think I just said he did something on the 7th day over here, but it's not true. Only chapter 1 does he name the days rested on the 7th day. And of course Genesis 2, the original sin is developed. The original sin is talked about. Heaven and earth are already created, no rain, but a spring would well up the water. That was different. In that one you have water. In this one you have in Genesis 2, earth and heavens are already made, but no water, no rain, but a spring would well up and water come from the ground, like those sprinkler systems. Man is made from dust, placed in Garden of Eden. God notices man is alone. Look at God notices man is alone. He like looks and does a double take, and he's like, "Oh, wait a minute, is he alone?" He notices God's alone. Anyway, he makes him fall asleep, and anyway, so I think that's about it. There's clear-cut differences. And just to recap what we did at the beginning here, here's the sources. So Genesis 1 came 620 BC, the priestly source. But first came Genesis 2. All right, the one where the Garden of Eden and all that. So 922 BC came the Yahweh source, the J source. And then, so this is like 300 years later, Genesis 1 came along. So Genesis 2 was written first, and then Genesis 1 with the 7 days creation, that came later. So and then it all got blended into the JEPT. All right, well, thank you. Thank you, Dee, for being here. And again, good to find out now than later. Always good. Better to find out before you get yourself in somewhere you don't want to be. All right, good night, Dee. Sweet dreams to you too. I'm going to call night too. I'm going to sign off and say thank you, everybody, for coming. Yep, Grace said sorry it didn't work out. for you this time. Sure, you'll find something better if you keep looking. That's right. Something will just come out of nowhere. But anyways, thank you for listening. And if you're listening on the replay, thank you for listening on the replay. Well, thank you, Grace. Thank you for being here, Grace and Dee. Thank you for being in the chat. Anybody else who joined in, thank you for joining in. If you're listening on the replay, thanks for listening on the replay. Everybody have a good rest of the evening, wherever you are, wherever you be. Hope things are going well. Everybody have an awesome day tomorrow. I hope your Tuesday goes well. Or no, Monday. What day is it? Today's Tuesday. Tomorrow's hump day, Wednesday. That's right. Tomorrow is Wednesday. Now I remember. Yes, tomorrow is Wednesday. All right. Have a great Wednesday, Tuesday, Monday, Friday, whatever day it is. And anyway, yep. Everybody be blessed. Good night, everybody. Peace. Shalom.